I will try to make our section more interactive, and despite the fact that all of you will have a very short presentation on the area. But what our section is going to be concentrated is focused on the policy area, no matter it's housing policy, is how to deliver, tackle the problem of loneliness, and also how a culture will shape government policy in the States, in Australia, and also in UK. And I think all of you have just listened to our Chief Secretary on the various initiatives we implemented during this term of the government. And all of those, no matter is in terms of volume and changes, is just humongous. So we are having a rapid change in Hong Kong. So I think it will be a good time for us to learn a bit from the experience in Australia, in UK, and also from the States. And why don't we start according to the program? We start from David. And are you going to have a presentation? Yeah, and I just said that I'm not going to introduce you, but I must say one word, is today is Australia Day. Yeah. So, yes, so you work on holiday. And also David is so famous that I don't know whether all our Hong Kong people know, there is a lane called David Lane in Hong Kong Island. Yeah, so I pass the time to David Lane, our famous people in Hong Kong.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Lam. I don't have a lot of time. I just wanted to present a couple of experiences of the work that our company's done and the work that I've been involved with around the world, not specifically in architecture, but in the development of policy and housing frameworks for older people. The slide identifies some of the work that we've done and the role that the company's played. We're a very large company in this space now. Having done 4,000 projects doesn't mean a lot other than we've had a lot of experiences. We sit in boardrooms and listen to the opinions and thoughts of many senior people. And what I want to share with you is where I think things are heading as far as housing policy is concerned. And before I do, I want to tell you a little story about a bookstore in Melbourne. Reading's bookstore was under enormous pressure in the last several years from a major international bookstore coming in directly opposite and selling a new approach to books. But the one thing the big international didn't have, and it was interesting, Professor Chappell making her comments about the way people feel about adherence and personality and happiness. Readings provides one of the most innovative services to the community as a bookstore. You can buy coffee there, you can eat muffins there, you can read the paper there, you can do all sorts of things in the bookstore, and it became part of the fabric of the community. And there's an interesting lesson to learn there, because aged care, caring for seniors, is not about bricks and mortar, it's about the services and care and the support that can be provided. And I can tell you one thing, most older people want to live in the community where they've known and grown up and lived their life. They are not necessarily wanting to go out into a special new building in the boondocks a long way from people they know and love. So with that, I want to just share my early experiences. We did a lot of work in Asia. I chose to come here and work in 1988, and I've worked throughout the region helping redefine social and development policy for governments, Japan government, Hong Kong government, Singapore government, other people, looking at how we can provide a better fabric and how we can integrate older people into the community, not isolating them in a separate society. So that's the background of these projects. And the first project I just want to share with you, and there's only 10, I'll quickly go through and then I want to come to some conclusions. This is the Hong Kong Housing Society project, which was done and commenced in 1996 I was very heavily involved, as were Dr. Lam and many other people around the room here in Hong Kong. And I got to give a lot of credit to the government and to the Hong Kong Society, Housing Society, for making an effort to develop a new solution, a solution which was not just about a nursing home or care for those who needed medical attention, but a building and a fabric which was designed to integrate people into the community and provide a range of services for those who are quite active and well. And so you'll see here another example of this. And the reason I'm raising these is because my opinion, very firmly, is that the key issue for seniors housing in the future is integration and interconnectivity. Integration is the physical expression of that built form. Interconnectivity is the social expression of that built form. And here's another one in Australia where we are developing just an image of buildings which are fully integrated. The older care is provided in parts of those buildings. There are young families, childcare centres, medical clinics. It is a normal mini suburb, if you like. And older people have a very vital role to play in that. This is another example. This is very similar, in fact, to the Housing Society project, with one specific difference. On the lower floors of that building is a major shopping centre. And so we're building seniors housing, both apartments for life and care, nursing home care, above a shopping centre with restaurants and other things. And many of the older people come down and love sitting in the areas below to enjoy and, if you like, become a voyeur of what's going on in the society around them. As another idea that's developed in recent years, particularly in America, is the development of university campus retirement communities. And this is, I think, a fabulous idea. And in fact, Hong Kong U could do a lot, Polytech could do a lot to think about this. The development of a relationship between older alumni, people who want to continue lifelong learning, and development of a relationship between the younger students and the experience of many older people who spent a career in their profession. Another area which is taking stronghold around the world is the fact that people want to live at home, and whatever their home is where they want to receive those services. And so what we're seeing now is the development of specific or boutique niche projects. This particular one is actually in Macau, or Hengqin on the Chinese side of Macau, where they're developing a fully integrated community for younger people, families, older people, all based around health and lifestyle. So we're seeing a market fragmentation occurring where we're not trying to be everything to everyone, we're actually trying to provide specific needs for individual personal interests. This is another approach to this developed with the support of the Singapore government, with an integrated health and wellness centre in the middle of Yixing in Singapore. Again, it's just a physical example, but it's the interesting development of the programs and the support services which outreach into the community, which I think provide the clue to the success of these types of developments. The point about the physical buildings is that they are proud, they are confident buildings which express the vital nature they play in the community. They are not built as nondescript buildings, they're not intended to be, they're intended to welcome people as a vital part of that community. Another interesting development, and this is of economic necessity, is we're now seeing commercial buildings being refitted to develop an approach to residential housing for seniors. And this is certainly an approach that could be applicable in Hong Kong. In fact, I did a scheme for Swire Properties here about 10 years ago for Kodak House in North Point, looking at exactly that development option. And last two, this is not my work, but it is work that I think is fantastic. In Finland, they developed a music academy to link older people with younger people. And during the day, the children mix with the older people. They have lunch together, they share activities together. And so learning how to design a building that facilitates a normal, natural social interaction between the young children around a specific cultural pursuit, the playing of musical instruments, is really quite interesting and I think very stimulating. And finally, the arts community in America. I found this fascinating. A group of citizens decided not only to develop where they wanted to live around an arts community, but they then bought the community back and employed their own management. And now they sell the art that they make as part of their activities, and they make more money selling their art. Some of them are very famous, $10 million for a painting, for example. They make more money, which they then put into the community activity. So they become a vital part of the community. And these are important issues that I wanted to share. So summary, we have the future of seniors care is based around the service economy. It's not bricks and mortar. So anybody who thinks they're building buildings for older people are wrong. These markets will become very eco-responsive, and the digital disruption that's going to occur, which allows both positive and negative impacts, needs to be carefully managed. We will see a lot of approaches to biodata harvesting. We're already involved in a number of projects and a number of organisations around the world doing this, and I won't go on, I don't have the time. But anybody who's interested, it's a fascinating area and has profound implications. I know that a lot of people talk about smart housing. I'd prefer to call it wiser housing. I think it's a more accurate term. I don't really know what smart housing means. It means a lot of things to different people, and I know governments all around the world like to use that term. I think we should be more circumspect about what it is that we're providing. So in terms of Hong Kong, I think one of the struggles Hong Kong and all of the Asian region suffer from is trying to make policy on the run as the ageing population issues has almost come across so quickly, much more different to what's happened in the West. And the relationship between ageing in society and the digital economy, I don't think is well understood, and it's going to have a profound effect on our policy settings. Importantly, I think governments, particularly here in Hong Kong and Singapore and other leading countries in the East, have a moral responsibility to recognise that not all the older people in our community here have had the privilege of becoming as wealthy as their younger children, and we do have to look after them. We have to learn what that might mean. I actually believe that filial piety can be a very constructive process. I remember when I did a number of projects here, everybody was telling me that nobody in Hong Kong wants to live in a retirement village because it's bad image for the family for filial piety. I just don't agree with that, and I'd love to debate it with anybody. I've talked to many, many older people here, and when you talk to them and talk about what that might mean for them and the possibility that that could mean, as an interpretation, a younger family saying to their mum and dad, because they're living overseas, we want to put you in the best possible place for you, for your individual needs, that's filial piety. I'll skip over that, and I just want to quickly, as a first world country, Hong Kong needs to develop leadership in first world solutions. What that might mean for you, I think, is quite interesting. I think we're going to see a multi-tiered system, not a two-tiered system, public and private. Professor Chappell said exactly the same thing. There's a third, fourth and fifth tier of integration across different sectors. We're already seeing public and private partnerships. We're seeing lots of different things happening. I think in Hong Kong the biggest challenge at the moment is the opening up of the social side of it, which the Housing Society did with Apartments for Life, not just putting care into nursing homes, but looking at the full spectrum of services and care. And I think land premiums and land cost is a major, major impediment. I worked for a number of the major private groups here who are very happy to invest, but they cannot do so with the conditions that apply with the land premium. I think that's a challenge for this government. I would like to recommend that it kick-starts some incentives, whether it be GFA incentives, whether it be land premium incentives. There are a range of policy settings that you can put into place, and you would see a rapid change in the opportunities that could be available here. Thanks very much.
Thank you, David. Apparently, the housing for the elderly is more than senior housing. It's housing for connecting people, putting meaning in the development. And David challenges with a few points, and I think we can further discuss afterwards. And then we'll have Janette, who is from UK. And WHO just stated a few years ago that the biggest epidemic of the world is not going to be the flu, it's not going to be the SARS, but it's loneliness. And Janette proposed a new approach to handle that, apart from appointing a minister of loneliness in UK, right? Oh,
yeah, it's crazy.
Hand over to you, Janette.
Thank you very much, and thank you for welcoming me to Hong Kong. It's my first visit to here and also to Asia, so I'm loving your warm weather, even if you guys think it's cold. So hello from me. It's also hello from my team back home. This is John, and this is Sheila. She's 93, and she's working on our project. I would just say at the bottom of this screen is my contact details. I'm fast running out of business cards, so take a photo of the contact details, just in case I run out. Okay, we have the same problem as you in the UK, in that we have an aging population. We know that there are going to be more and more older people as time goes on, and less money to spend on appropriate care for them. In the UK, there's been significant cuts to funding, which has forced us to think about new creative solutions, and I'm going to talk to you about one of those today. But it's not just about money, it's about a different way of doing things, a different way of approaching the problems. So what was the thing we wanted to look at? The health impact of loneliness is huge. It's the equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Imagine having a healthy life, living really well, and then becoming lonely in older age. It's as if you smoked 15 cigarettes a day. Equivalent to being an alcoholic, or potentially 1.9 times more likely to visit a GP or to go into residential care. So all these things cost more money, and the more older people there are, the more it's a challenge for our UK government to find the money for this. So we worked in the UK to look at different solutions to this, but first we needed to identify the problem and also associate a cost with it. So we looked at the levels of people going into care, or the levels of people visiting emergency services or health services, and they estimated that we might save around £4,000 UK pounds over 5 years for each person that we could turn away from loneliness. So it was a significant problem. When you look at the map behind me, 1 million people haven't spoken to anyone for a month. Now, you might think that's crazy here in Hong Kong with so many people in a small space, but believe me, even in the City of London, where people are living very close by, they're not talking to their neighbours, they're not talking and interacting in a meaningful way with other people. And in Worcestershire, where our project is focused, up to 35,000 people may experience loneliness, and 11,500 would be affected chronically. That means it's starting to affect their physical and mental health. Now, we heard earlier about the problem of focusing on crisis services and not enough focus on preventative care. And we all know that lots of money is spent on those crisis services. You may have seen the analogy that's on the screen of the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, clearing up the people who have fallen off, because there's no fence at the top. That's what we're doing in the UK government. We're spending money on crisis interventions when really we would like to spend money on preventative services to stop people getting in that situation in the first place. You might have an idea to build a fence, but actually there might be lots of other complex issues behind that situation. For example, are they falling? Are they being pushed? Are they jumping? We don't know. We just have an idea. We have an idea of what the solution might be. We think we want to build a fence to stop people having to provide crisis care at the bottom of that cliff. Now, it could be that if you invested money at the top and built a fence and got it properly maintained and built it of the right material and worked in partnership with other people, that you could find the solution to the problem. And in turn, you wouldn't need to spend as much money on the crisis services. So we invented something called a social impact bond, and it sounds complicated, but it's not. First, you have a social issue. In this case, it was loneliness. Then you have a government that's brave enough to take the risk and not have all the answers. Then you have social investors. These are people who are interested in the social impact as well as perhaps a return on their investment. And then we have the service providers. The good thing that is the social impact bond enables is for very small providers as well as large providers to get involved. Historically, those small providers couldn't win government contracts because it would be a big risk. So the government makes a deal with the social investors. They decide how much money they would like to save, and they decide the value of each intervention and agree a contract. The investors pay the money to the service providers to do the work, who provide the support and address the social issue and reduce loneliness in our case. We then evaluate that. Did it work? Did we measure it? Were we able to find the outcomes? And if the answer is yes, and only if the answer is yes, the government pays the money back to the social investors, perhaps with a return. If the project doesn't work, no public money is spent on the service. So the risk is transferred completely to those investors. And what that enables us to do is to be creative, be innovative. It's not contracts with very specific outputs. We're looking longer term outcomes. All we say to the service providers is, your job is to reduce loneliness. And they come up with a whole range of different ways of doing that. From bucket lists, from flash mobs, to taking people bowling, to having really fun, exciting interventions, rather than a very strict program that the government would have specified. We're allowing people to be creative, and then they're able to come up with the solutions. And just finally, part of the social impact bond, a very important part, is collecting data, both in the early days when you're trying to work out what the solution is, but then the learning that you have over time. This data helps to shape the service as you go along. You don't have to find the answer before you contract with the social impact bond. The social impact bond helps you to find the answer. It helps you to work differently across government, across different partners, and with the social sector. And that data helps us to shape services as we go along and also in the future. So thank you very much. We have another session this afternoon that goes into a lot more detail of social impact bonds. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Janette. This is a very interesting way of delivering service and also shaping the government policy. And our third speaker is Professor BRAUN, and she will start a very interesting discussion of how the culture will influence the policies.
Aloha, thank you very much. So I'm talking about aging policy in the US. And you know, all policy in every country is based on values. And everyone knows that in the United States, we really value individuality and autonomy and states' rights. And that's the American dream. Anyone can come to America and make it. Anyone can make it as long as they work hard enough. But what this means is that the government then takes a step back from providing for people. Because of those values, I think it is surprising that we have any social programs at all. But we do have some, and I'll talk about a few that concern the elderly. The one is Social Security. I think we're famous for Social Security. It was established in 1935 when 50% of US elders were living in poverty. So it was a bad time in the United States. It was the Depression, and so this policy came out of this bad time. A lot of people are hurting. That's when it happened. You can see some pictures from that time. It's a payroll tax, and so your post-retirement income is based on your contributions. Another social program we have for the elderly is Medicare and Medicaid. It's two programs, but it was enacted under the same bill. They're just two different acts of the same bill, and it was established in 1965. Now, this was a time when the US was trying, some people in the US were really trying to have a national health insurance program, but there was so much opposition to this. It didn't go with our values. So that's why our programs are the way that they are. Medicare just focuses on providing help to the aged, blind, and disabled to cover some medical care, and Medicaid is only for the poor. And in terms of the elderly, it covers long-term care. If you become poor, if you spend all of your money, then Medicaid will step in and help cover some of that care. These were both opposed, saying, no, Americans should be able to make it without any help. However, these programs do provide an important safety net for our seniors. And you can see here that if you excluded Social Security payments to US elders, 41% would be in poverty today. But because of Social Security, only 9% of US elders are living in poverty. And you can see that Medicare and Medicaid together provide health insurance for more than 3 in 10 Americans. So these programs are important. And under our current government, which really I think is going back to our very traditional values of individuality and autonomy, now these programs are being threatened. And there's a lot of talk in the US about privatizing Social Security and reducing coverage under Medicare and Medicaid and pushing long-term care, private long-term care insurance. So this movement has sort of galvanized me to start to sign petitions and write letters to Congress to try to save Social Security and save Medicare. And there are some movements in that area. One of the solutions that's been proposed in the United States is private long-term care insurance. And I would just like to tell you about the latest news on that front. There were several newspaper articles over the past few years saying that private long-term care insurance companies are going broke, and there's some reasons for that. One is because only 20% of seniors have bought policies, so it doesn't have the broad risk pool that you should have in an insurance company. People have not let their policies lapse, which means they keep paying the premiums. So the insurance companies have a lot of people to insure if anything goes wrong. They were hoping some people would pay in and then give it up, but that hasn't happened. The insurance companies were counting on higher interest rates, which did not happen either. And then now we have developed in our private sector a lot of nursing homes and assisted living facilities that are actually quite good. The insurance companies thought that people would never want to go to a nursing home, that families would never send their elderly to a nursing home. But now the nursing homes are so good. You want to go. There's so much. My dad is in one. He is so busy. He has exercise, news and views, lunch. He has something else, then the movie. It's like jam-packed all day, more than I could provide at home. So people are going, the long-term care, private long-term care insurance companies, he happens to have very good long-term care insurance, are paying, and he'll probably live forever, and they will lose money. So now the sales of these policies are falling, the premiums are going up, and the payouts are going down. So there's a substantial movement now in recognition that maybe these private insurance schemes are not going to be the panacea that we had hoped. There's a substantial movement to keep our social programs alive and to expand them. So more people are speaking out, and as educators, as academic partners, one of our missions is to increase awareness of the benefits of social programs, especially those that are based on a broad risk pool. And I think that that's not only the mission of educational partners, but all partners that are engaged in gerontology. So what other solutions are being offered in the United States? Unfortunately, they are pretty much all individual at this time. What older adults are doing in the United States, they're working longer so that they can afford their old age. And I was looking at a comparison with Asia. Of course, even though more older adults are working in the US, not the country with the most older people working is Japan. So we're not quite up to Japan standard, but you can see in the blue graph that the number of older people working is going up significantly. Another solution is individuals saving more. A lot of companies now have stopped funding pensions, so people do not have pensions. I was complaining to my sister. She said, "Kathryn, you're the only one in the family that has a pension. None of your siblings have pensions. That's old-fashioned. We have to save on our own." And so you can see in the middle graph, the blue line of pensions is going down, the red line of individual savings is going up. And then people are entering into reverse mortgages. So this means they have a house, then they sell their house back to the bank, and they can use that money to fund their care. And more people are doing that as well. So in the end, I represent ACAP, the Active Aging Consortium, Asia Pacific, and we like to think that active aging and good aging is an individual and a social policy responsibility. In the United States, we tend to focus on individual responsibility, and it is true, individuals must prepare for old age and they must adapt positive health habits and health practices for the long term. That is true. But I believe that there is a huge role for social policy, and the United States can do a lot more. Social policy should support home and community-based care. Social policies should establish insurance programs with a universal risk pool, and social policy should increase healthy life expectancy to reduce long-term care needs. And I hope America will listen to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathryn. And I hope Donald Trump will listen to you too. 同時可唔可以幫我哋將呢個台移後少少，同埋預備啲咪俾台下啲audience. And so we have a very interesting presentation and on various aspects, but all of those are really important aspects. And what I'm going to do is I will open the discussion to the floor. So if you have any questions or comments you want to discuss, please prepare that now. And after we have a bit of interaction, I will open the discussions to the floor. So prepare some microphone for our audience. And so why don't we start from housing, David? And you pose a number of challenges to our Hong Kong government, apparently. And so can you elaborate a bit? And you see that land premium is really the biggest hurdle?
I'm not sure that it's the biggest, but it's certainly a major part of it. And I was specifically referring to the area of social support where alternative housing solutions are provided to older people, which are not just care and attention homes or infirmaries or hospitals. At the moment in Hong Kong, other than the Housing Society product, unlike many other parts of the world where assisted living and retirement communities and other alternative solutions are available, they don't exist in that form here in Hong Kong. And secondly, for many of the public sector housing, there's a lot of historical, if you like, building baggage of fairly small flats with older people living in apartments where the bathrooms aren't suitable, the kitchens are very small, and a lot of accidents happen. So opening the market up, at least creating an incentive to look at exploring different housing solutions. Bear in mind, around the world, the US has got the largest alternative solution at about 12%. Most people live at home. 80 to 90% of people live at home. But for those who do want to look at alternatives to adapt their lifestyle to improve their well-being, alternatives are important. So the housing supply chain at the moment is quite restricted, because if you want to control policy around a special purpose vehicle like a retirement community, generally the ownership vests with the land asset owner, and you can't sell freehold title. And that's always been a challenge. So Hong Kong, since you and I were working on the early Housing Society project, that's been a challenge. So I think it's a really timely opportunity now. Singapore, for example, are looking at providing a mandate in normal housing communities for a minimum number of flats to be kept for older people, in the same way that they mandate a minimum number of flats be kept for cultural minorities. They are mandating that some older people be accommodated in normal housing, be it 10% or whatever. And that can float a little bit, but there's a strategic target for it so that they become part of that community.
But there is always a debate that saying that if we have all housing conducive to aging in place, actually we don't need any retirement housing at all.
Good point.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the problems with a lot of developer-led housing is that you may have fairly large flats, but if you actually look at the devil in the detail, the ability for an older person or a disabled person to live in that flat is quite difficult. So one of the things that our company's been doing is spending a lot of time on adaptable housing so that the housing, the thinking behind the planning and the design allows anybody to live there in a normal way. And I think that's the ideal solution. If you wanted my personal opinion, this might shock a lot of people, but I wouldn't build another nursing home in Australia. I don't think it's necessary. And I would rather build apartments for life and put older people in
Didn't you
that.
just listen that nursing homes are good with movies, everything there? And
I know, but I think nursing homes are a product of an institutional setting. And I think with the digital economies coming online, you will find that more and more people are saying, I don't want to be institutionalised, I want to live in a particular way with independence where I can. And certainly culturally here in Asia, that's very pervasive. I have 4 parents in nursing homes, and I know the limitations they struggle with in having things taken away from them. There are a lot of things that are great about nursing home, but there are a lot of things that aren't. And a lot of that is put into the context of institutional settings.
yeah, Janette and Kathryn, do you want to chip in the discussion on housing? Yeah.
We've been exploring the intergenerational projects as well, and they haven't worked so well in the UK, so I'm really interested to know if you've got an opinion on whether it's better to have intergenerational work going on in people's own homes, so for example, a student living with an older person, or whether it's better to build a development where you have it sort of, they sell their home and move into a development where students and older people live together, because we're struggling with this in the UK at the moment.
I mean, that's that side of it, the social side of it's an interesting question. In Holland, for example, they have nursing homes where, or rooms that are available, and they provide discounted rent for university students so they can live in a room next door to an older person.
Yep.
Used to be a nursing home, but now it's got, say, 30 students and 50 older people. And the students have a social covenant to provide social care for the older people. It's a very, very interesting model, and they've had great success. I think the question you raise about the compatibility of that is about cultural acceptance of that and whether people tolerate young students making a lot of noise and older people wanting some quietness. That's a social thing. The sort of housing we have been developing is interrelated in that there are a number of different uses, but you have separate entrances, you have separate access to different things. So the buildings are part of a complex jigsaw puzzle, but not necessarily everybody discharges into the same place. So you start compartmentalising social hierarchy and privacy hierarchy within the building to make sure that people have a bit of independence.
Yeah, we're exploring this in Hong Kong too by subdividing the unit. Yeah. Any question or comment from the floor? Do you want to raise on the issue of housing? Housing for the elderly? Yeah, please. Yeah. Do you have a microphone for that gentleman?
Thank you. Since David and Kathryn is on the floor, I have a cross-agenda questions. I've heard the unsuccessful long-term care insurance that happened in US, and I hear from David the model of delivering the next generation of elderly homes may different, like aging at home. If, from a policy perspective, if a private insurer or any financial tools will come into role that solve the problem of the money have no place to go, and the model of the elderly care will be changing, what would be your two visibility on the next 20 years, the insurance role in the housing funding as a sources? I would like to hear from you. Thank you.
Yeah. Kathryn?
Well, housing is critical for everyone. Everyone needs to have housing. I do totally agree that intergenerational living is the best. When my father first moved into a facility, he said, I don't like it here. It's just old people. You know, who wants to live with just old people? So that is very true. But in the case of many of the older people who are in some of these facilities, they have a dementia or they have disabilities that would make it very difficult for them to live in the community. And as we heard from our speaker from the UK, even when my father was living independently, his main complaint was loneliness because no one would visit him. And he chose not to move close to his children, which is so interesting, but I think that's part of the American value of being independent and autonomous. He kept saying, I don't want to live with you, I don't want to live with you, I want to live by myself. So I think, again, it goes back to culture. And so I think our private long-term care insurance fed into our culture of wanting to be independent and alone and making your own choices. And that's what's happened, although only 20% of people could afford it. So the industry is not viable in the long run, I think. But we'll see. We'll see.
So can insurance tackle the problem of a high premium in Hong Kong?
I think, well, I don't have the statistics, but I think they play a role. I've been in discussions with AIA here in Hong Kong. Insurance is a very complex issue, and I think historically, for example, Japan developed long-term health insurance a long time ago now, and it's been moderately successful, although they too have been having trouble with viability. I think all societies will experiment with these things, but my experience tells me that Japan, for example, will work that out, and they'll refine it, and they'll refine it better. And I think we need to learn the lessons of the insurance and not say it doesn't work, but say there's a better solution. Now, why I raised the issue about AIA and other insurance groups, historically insurance has been about long-term insurance so that you can pay for your physical place where you live. But what they're looking at is incentive programs for proactive positive wellness using biodata management, so they incentivise people with insurance policies around, are they living a healthy life? Do they deserve to continue to be insured because they're not abusing themselves? So there are very complex interrelationships available for insurance companies to provide more creative alternative finance packages.
Yeah, while we are talking about insurance, why not we talk about bond? And actually in Hong Kong, we just started a very preliminary discussion of using the concept of a social impact bond in solving some of our social issues. But can you enlighten us, Janette, why you select loneliness as your primary subject in this area?
It is something that affects a lot of communities in the UK, whether it's the rural communities or the cities. We found that housing wasn't such a big problem in the UK. We have good welfare systems. We have some good housing, although our intergenerations work isn't as good as we would hope. But we found that it was the support structures that were missing. Families were moving away. They were working longer hours. They weren't able to commit enough time to support each other. And communities were becoming too sort of separate. Even things like transport networks changing, faster routes happening means less stops. Even ticket machines, technology is great, right? But ticket machines being put on platforms in stations mean you can't talk to someone anymore. So all of these little changes, the little local stores moving, things like that.
We are going to have the Amazon supermarket very soon. Yeah.
It makes a big difference. And we were finding that we were progressing in so many ways and we were enjoying those successes. But when we looked round, people were still miserable. And so we wanted to invest in some of the things that would change that. And one of the areas that was costing so much was the use of the healthcare services. So we tried to drill down and unpick which of those bits we could test. There are some that just have to keep going. You know, we still have to do the operations. We still have to do things. But loneliness seemed to be one of those things that we were able to measure because the US had developed a really good scale for measuring loneliness, a 4-point questionnaire. So we're able to measure it. We're able to attribute a cost to the healthcare services. So it was like, why not? Let's see if we can find a solution. And at the moment, it's working. We're able to reduce loneliness, which then has an impact on health and well-being.
So what kind of investors were involved in this?
Mainly philanthropic investors. So there are those that see the social impact bond and think, oh, it's lots of rich investors that want to make lots of money. But actually, the investors in all of the projects I've worked on have been people that are really passionate about the area. So they're interested in education or children's services, or in this case, older care. And they're interested in that area, and maybe they might have donated to a cause before, but now they can also invest. And if they do get a return on their money, then they can invest in something else and recycle that money. So it's a very passionate team of people.
Can I say that it's pretty much still a CSR thing for all these investors?
Sorry, what's
CSR, so social responsibility.
Yeah. But mostly, it's about wanting to make a difference, make a change, and it's a bonus if they also get a return on their investment. But they're very involved. They want to see those changes. They want to learn. The SIB isn't just about using new money. It's about doing things differently, and the partnerships that it creates, the data that comes from it, and the evidence for future contracts. So it's the whole package. It's not just new money being spent in a different way.
Okay, good. Kathryn or David, you want to?
I think that's a fabulous idea, and it's certainly true that many of our active aging members are engaged in activities to reduce loneliness, whether it's through education or helping them learn a new musical instrument or singing in Indonesia or computer technology in Australia and Hong Kong and Korea, where they're trying to bring older adults into different organizations and help them learn and go into their homes, help with activities to, all of them help with activities to reduce loneliness, which I think is just critical. And that is the whole sector, a lot of what the whole sector that our keynote, Dr. Chappell, was talking about, that third sector trying to do with not very much support, lots of activities to reduce loneliness. It is critical.
Yes, it is. And I would say, as I just mentioned, WHO stated that it is actually this epidemic really kills. Yeah. And might be our number one killer for the population very soon. Yeah, while most of the societies are aging, some of them are really rapid. So any comments or questions from the floor? Yeah, please. Our Vice Chairman.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you, speakers. You are fantastic. We learned a lot. There's one aspect that I haven't heard is about the technology side. Can you share with us what you have done in your countries about using perhaps telemedicines and other things that you think it would make it even better? Thank you.
Yeah, I think
Thanks.
David just mentioned a bit on how to personalize and collecting data, this kind of thing. Yeah.
I've been working a little bit with a Singaporean Chinese-based company called Borderless Healthcare Group, and they're looking at borderless being no boundaries, using the internet and technology delivery. They're looking at providing in-home care in China, wirelessly, if you like. Lots of different things. What a lot of people don't realise, most of us are quite ignorant about what R&D is going on with the big groups, the Samsungs, the IBMs, the Apples. There is massive money going into artificial intelligence, biodata harvesting. All of these things provide product solutions. For example, I was with one of the large Chinese companies in Beijing only October last year, and they announced a couple of $1 billion investment with General Motors for investing in driverless cars. And I was sitting there at breakfast, he said, I've got to go, I've got to announce this press agreement, and I read later what he was up to, but what he said to me cryptically was, we want to use the same technology to help older people navigate in their homes. So they're starting to look at technology which allows an older person who might be blind or confused to actually have the house talk back to them, communicate effectively with them. So look at it, it's a whole other subject, but I can assure you it is an exponential and dramatically increasing, almost all-pervasive. I remember when social media came out 10 years ago, I didn't want to know anything about it. I don't have a choice anymore. I have to be on Twitter and this and that. It's going to be the same in technology. The issue for society and community is how do we manage and control that, and how do we provide our privacy and independence? Because I can have technology now which measures blood pressure in the home, tells you when you go to the fridge what you've got in there, is it out of date, what you want to cook. I've got glucose problems, you can't have that, don't you take that out of the fridge, it's not good for you. All this sort of stuff's available now. So,
yeah, exactly. Actually, I explore with IBM, Google, and Microsoft, and also Alibaba on how to use AI in solving the problem of loneliness. And I think artificial intelligence is more than a robot. Actually, they have the capacity of connecting real people, like-minded people or people who want to enter in some kind of dialogue, communication among the elderly people. And so I think technology is a good thing, but the key is how we can put meaning in that technology. Janette, do you have?
I have two comments to make. One is I think technology is awesome, and in 5 years' time, I think it's going to be really useful to our clients that we're working with at the moment. But our 93-year-olds, like the lady that was on the slide, we find that a lot of our clients have been given a phone or a tablet by their family, and it goes in the drawer. Because they don't understand how to use it. They're afraid of it. They often say they think it's conspiring against them. It's something that they cannot understand. It's not intuitive. So we have a big problem in the UK. There are some fantastic services. Even the pendants that go around the neck, it's very simple technology. My grandmother fell over. We said, where was it? Oh, I keep it to the side of my bed. You know, they're not using the technology. So I think more investment needs to be made in making it accessible, making it explained to them in their own language. So maybe one of their peers doing video blogs and creating these things. One other example I wanted to give about using technology, using social media. When a client can use social media, it can open up a whole new world, even if they're living alone at home. And people often put a downer on social media and say it stops us being connected, it's not real people. But I'll give you one example, a lady called Eileen who I look after, and she said, I don't like people, I don't want to go to bingo, I don't want to see old people. And so I set her up on Facebook and introduced us to this site that's local. It's a history site. And she goes round our town and takes photos of places, how they look now. And she posts them on the site and explains what it was like when she was young. And the number of friends she has on Facebook now, and she interacts with them every day, and she's so popular. And she feels connected to that community in a way that she never did before. And it's also making her exercise, because they say, we want to know what the railway was like, and so she has to walk another mile. So it's brilliant. It's a really good example, but only if you help them to use those tools.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, and I think it will change as our generation gets older. We're more used to technology. But right now, the same. My father will not touch it. Everything is in the drawer at my dad's house, too. But this is another thing that, that members of the Active Aging Consortium Asia Pacific are doing, is they're actually going out and teaching technology to older adults. How to use computer, how to use these flip phones, these smartphones, how to use GPS. I just learned how to use GPS recently myself. So it is very, very exciting, but in the people that are in their 90s now with dementia, I'm not quite sure how helpful it's going to be. I'm not quite sure if there's going to be a substitute for just real human one-on-one interaction with them.
Yeah, Kathryn, as during your presentation, you verbalized a very sensitive word in Hong Kong too. It's called privatization, and but I'm well aware that it is very sensitive of having a social policy being privatized, but also it is very innovative of inviting private investor in shaping the social policy. And also, I don't think with 1 in 3 in the future elderlies, we can't afford to not involving the private sector, no matter in housing, in healthcare, in long-term care. So what's the difference between privatizing a social policy and involving a private sector in shaping the whole society?
Well, I think there's lots of difference in that. For us to privatize our Social Security system would probably mean that people would not have a steady income, because the income that they get would be dependent on how much interest they could, whoever's investing that money for them. So if it broke up into a lot of different private companies, like stockbrokers that are doing the investment, and somebody gets 1%, somebody gets 0%, somebody gets 20%, that's just not going to work across the board. So we would like to, those of us who want to save Social Security would like to keep it as it is. On the other hand, of course, we need private investors. This is gerontology. This is a growth industry. We do need and we expect private investors to come in. And I love this idea of having the private investors. They're social investors, and they're providing the income, and they'll get paid back by the government. But probably the return will not be huge. It'll be capped. And so I suppose if someone were suggesting to privatize Social Security, but there was a minimum that the payouts had to be for everyone, and there was a maximum profit they could take, I mean, that might be different. But in the United States, we don't do well with that. We're just all for letting people get whatever profit they can out of things.
Yeah. In Hong Kong, we are also exploring long-term care insurance, as we stated in our 20-year forecast report on our elderly services in Hong Kong. And any suggestion for us? Go for as you mentioned, the private long-term care insurance system in the States, or basically a government-run long-term care insurance system like Japan?
Whatever you do, the insurance has to have a broad risk pool. If you just cherry pick a few people to be in this insurance plan, then you're only going to be able to help a few people.
Yep.
And if those happen to be the smartest, healthiest, longest living people, you might go broke.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, you have to just think through. I'm not an insurance expert, but broad risk pools are going to work better than small risk pools.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Any comment on this area?
I'm not sure exactly where it fits in, but just as a follow-on to a comment I made earlier, one of the unique characteristics of Hong Kong, it has the highest cost of rental in the world. Only figures came out last week, actually, per income. So for every dollar you earn, the amount you pay towards your rent is the highest in the world. Funnily enough, Sydney is number 2 now.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So we have similarities, and I understand the pain. I have a friend who lives in Sydney who pays nearly $1,000 a week rent, which is, $50,000 a year just to rent a house in the middle of nowhere. It's half that price where I live. So this goes to the heart of loneliness. It goes to the heart of depression or stresses in life. If you're working all your life but your rental continues to go, if you're in that band you don't own, then for an older person, that accumulated factor, and I suggest to you that in Hong Kong, where there's public housing and there's private sector housing, but the rental cost is still very high as an expression of how much they generate in income.
Yep.
And so where I think insurance could possibly help is to maybe look at taking the top off some of that pain threshold with incentive programs around a more holistic approach rather than just rental. Whether it's about health, whether it's about participating in wellness programs or social programs, there's a lot of things being explored at the moment. I don't think the long-term health insurance proposal purely as a solution for housing affordability or alternative housing solutions will of itself be a solution.
So any question and comment from the floor? Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm really impressed on the integrated development. My question is addressed to Dr. Lane. I'm still not clear about the concept of university-based retirement community. Is it only for the retirement committee among the university member or maybe others? So how about if the university is still not a retirement community age-friendly?
That's a good question, and I didn't have the time to really elaborate. But as a concept, it started where if universities around the world with the digital economy and online learning, all the universities have to build newer, sexier buildings to appeal to their students. So you've got all these buildings getting built all the time and regenerated, but in fact half of the students don't go to university anymore. They do it online. So you get a lot of, if you like, lazy asset class in university campuses. So in the US and a number of other countries around the world, they've started looking at repurposing university buildings to provide an opportunity for older people who might have an interest in lifelong learning, that might want to do a degree in something that they've never done before, never had an opportunity, but they get a big benefit. They get lovely gardens and grounds usually. They get lots of cosmopolitan activity, lots of activity in the campus. They've got libraries, they've got gymnasiums, they've got all sorts of things that they can plug into. But they've got something special. Older people have a wealth of life experience so they can contribute back to the university students, the younger students. So one of the things that they've investigated is providing a discount for your rent to provide 30 hours a month tutorials to students. So there's a complex symbiosis between the students, young students learning and the older people, but they're not limited to alumni. Anybody can buy on the campus. We're building one, or proposing to build one, at La Trobe University in Melbourne, quite a well-known Melbourne university, and we're going to place it right in the middle of the campus. And so the older people can enjoy everything that young people enjoy, but they can also go to courses and they can do other things that enhance their own well-being, certainly stop social isolation, but it's not limited to being a university alumni, no.
Yeah, I was invited by the Southern Australian government to visit Adelaide just a couple of months ago. And they have a huge project, which is very similar to what David mentioned. There is an old car manufacturing plant in Adelaide, which has been abandoned for quite a number of years. And they turn it into an innovation and technology hub. And one of the key development area is BRAUN technology. And so they invite the university to put a campus just next to that technology hub. And what they are going to do is they are going to build a senior housing just next to it too. So the older people can live in the campus just next to the technology hub. And so much so that the students, the professors, the researchers can really test their technology and develop their technology around the elderly people. And the elderly people were well part of the whole campus. And so much so that they can go for lifelong learning, they can intermingle with the university students, and the students benefit during the process, and the researchers can observe and develop products accordingly. So I think it's an excellent idea, and we need more of this kind of innovation in our coming years, so much so that we can really not just to tackle the disease burden or the long-term care burden, but to fully embrace the aging population in our education system, into our housing system, in our town planning process, so much so that everybody can enjoy. So on this note, I know time's up and going to be our lunchtime very soon. So thank you very much for attending this, and especially great thanks to three of our great speakers. Thank you. Thank you very much.